Hi, everybody. How you doing? Good. Excellent. Excellent. So thank you very much for coming to this session. You're probably skipping lunch to be here, so we appreciate that very much. We really are going to be tackling this a bit differently than maybe what you might think of as a normal panel. Once we do our introductions, I'm going to come down there, and I really want you guys to be thinking about the questions that you have, because it's really important to us to bring value to each and every one of you. And so I really want to flush out all the questions that you have, okay? So we're going from intros to questions, and then we're going to really dig in, okay? This specific panel is about, more money, more problems. Obviously, in the panel you saw this morning, it was more about, individual investors and things like this. But you may or may not know, if you're a filmmaker, that there's actually resources of a much larger scale. And that's what we're going to talk about in this session, okay? To introduce myself, my name is John Heinsohn. I'm the CEO of a production company called Bunnygraph. I'm also the Vice President of New Media for the Producers Guild of America. And I work on projects such as the Academy Awards and things of that nature. I just, a few months ago, produced a short film using crowdfunding called Lone Hunter. And one of our filmmakers is on the panel. So David, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm David Gale, and I'm not sure why I'm on the panel, but they're going to figure it out as we go. My career mostly was at MTV, and I left there about a year and a half ago. I ran their feature film division, and then I ran 2 digital units there, making mostly focused on the creative side of it. And about a year and a half ago, I left, and I decided I want to start my own company, and we'll show a reel in a minute of what it is. And I've been raising money, which we successfully did about 6 weeks ago, and we're off and running. And we'll talk more about it as we go, as appropriate.
Great. Do you want should we show that first, or
if you want to?
Yeah. Why don't we show it really quick?
Okay.
Do you have that to show, Thomas?
Or we could do it after the group of people.
Sure. I'm sorry, Chance. Go ahead.
It's in your email.
Hi, I'm Chance Barnett, co-founder and CEO of a company called Crowdfunding.com. I started the company after being a technology entrepreneur and investor here in LA for the last 15 years. I was an early participant in a legislative initiative to help project owners like you raise investment finance over the web, which became a set of policies and legislation known as the Jobs Act. I write for Forbes on startups, finance, and entrepreneurship. At Crowdfunder, we're financing a growing set of technology, digital media companies, oftentimes with celebrities, big names attached, but also independent type. So we're a bit broader. And just to be very clear about it, we only raise equity. We don't do rewards-based crowdfunding like Kickstarter and Indiegogo.
Okay. Greg, go ahead.
My name is Greg Parker, CEO and co-founder of Indie Crowdfunder. We actually do equity-based crowdfunding for entertainment projects as well. So for me, I am a former government official, policy analyst, and I have Series 82 private equity and Series 63 equity, or Series 63 securities licenses.
Wow. Okay. My name is Tom Choi. I'm mostly an actor and filmmaker. Currently, I'm going to my 3rd season recurring on a TV show called Teen Wolf on MTV, playing Ken Yukimura. I don't know if you guys watch that. If you're 16 and you're a girl, maybe you watch it. I'm just kidding. But I'm probably here to represent the creative side. I produced a short film with John involved called Lone Hunter on Indiegogo.com. So obviously that was crowdfunded successfully.
Great. And do we have David's reel to show? Okay.
Well, to set it up, by the way,
Right.
this is our investor reel. So the whole point was, and it could have been put on Indiegogo or Kickstarter or another funding site. Knowing how things have changed in the last year and a half, maybe it would have belonged on an equity-based funding site, but that didn't really exist in the way we could do it now. So that will be interesting to talk about that. And we ended up raising $2 million, friends and family, and we're going to launch in about a month. So this is a reel that sort of presented to the investors, say, give us some money.
There are 25 million men and women who have served our country, and 80 million direct family members. Americans have shown their appreciation in many ways. As a nation, we have never been more focused on this community, more committed, and we want to do more. Now there's a media initiative devoted exclusively to serving these exceptional men and women. to the Mighty. The Mighty is a next-generation media brand, providing a vast network of digital, local, social media, and traditional platforms. We will be the military community's central destination for trusted quality entertainment.
That was great, David. Thank you very much.
All right, so I don't need to talk anymore because I spent my whole time with that.
No, that's okay. So I'm actually going to go down to jumping on. I really want to get a sense with you guys of what some of the things you're interested in, the things you want to learn more about crowdfunding, especially in terms of you've got bigger projects. Yes, sir.
I'm interested in hearing about the compliance requirements for equity, how that affects the sort of resulting take or cut.
Okay. Who would like to tackle that question?
You wanted to go or you want me to go?
Let's have a former policymaker.
Compliance from the standpoint of how much fees we obtain?
No, in terms of how much it costs to do the filings.
Okay, no, that's
verify your investors and all
okay.
that sort of,
That's fantastic. Now, at Indie Crowdfunder, we believe cost is definitely a key question, or maybe even a key barrier to getting filmmakers up and running when you're dealing with equity. There are a lot of statutory things that do have to be done, such as background checks, bad actor checks. Your company needs to go through due diligence, things to that effect. The SEC estimates that it can cost anywhere for a $100,000 equity raise, it can cost about $18,000. We've gotten that cost down to $8,000, and that includes our fee. So we've definitely wanted to make sure that it was cost effective for filmmakers to get into this. Our whole goal is to make equity easy. We even go so far as to, we have a service called our Equity Concierge Service. Once you put in the filmmakers, or once you put in your film project information into our site, it actually goes and creates your PPM, subscription agreement, all the government forms necessary. And since we're a registered filing agent, we actually file those on your behalf. So compliance, and since we're affiliated with a broker dealer, we handle your entire equity investment to include setting up escrow and everything. And all that's covered within our fee. So we wanted to make sure that cost was very inexpensive for you so that you can tackle the equity challenge. I hope I answered your question.
Quick follow-up. Is that scale, does that cost scale, so 8%? Just kind of-
8%. Oh, total. You mean our fee plus the due diligence cost. That 8%, $1 million, our fee would be the same over. No, it does not scale. It's pretty much 8% no matter what you raise.
And just to point it out, there's different models that are available to you. So at Crowdfunder, and just to parse it out, today there is no equity crowdfunding with non-accredited investors. There's potential ways where you could do what's called a Regulation A offering. Very, very
504.
expensive. Yeah, so there's ways you could look at doing it, but it's really not reasonable for, say, a $500,000 or $100,000 project. What we do at Crowdfunder is we work strictly with accredited investors and institutional investors. That's available today, and the compliance requirements are quite a bit less in that market if you're not touching non-accredited investors. You're really just required to verify that the investors are truly accredited, whether it's a certified letter from them, their attorney, or their accountant. Or income statements. We provide that for a limited set of companies. Our fee is actually a lot different. We're not a broker dealer, so we don't take a percentage of the money you raise. We charge you a software fee for using our platform. And for a select set of deals that we really like and we want to get behind, we create what's called a special purpose vehicle. And so we actually become your investor, and our crowd of investors invest into that fund, and we manage it. And so we're actually the ones doing all the filing and compliance and verification for you.
How many of you have done a Kickstarter or Indiegogo campaign before for your projects? Okay, have these been smaller numbers, smaller monies you're raising? Right, so that's the thing, like with crowdfunding your projects, what you're hearing about out there are the people that are getting these smaller amounts of money. But what these guys are representing is really the future, raising large amounts of money. So one of the more successful films you might have heard about is the Veronica Mars movie project, which raised about $5.7 million and had 91,000 people contributing to that. Pretty crazy, right? That's the whole thing. So this is much more of a focused area, right? So if you are trying to raise like $5 million for a film, these are the people that are the gatekeepers, very specific big chunks of money, right? Because as Tom, maybe you can talk about this, you know, when you obviously you're raising funds and you have all these individual investors, you know, it's the whole question of the perks that they get and all the things like that. There's a whole process. It's very, very different. Right? It's a very personal kind of connection because you're connected to your community. Isn't that right, Tom, in terms of your experience?
Yeah, and somebody actually came up to me a little bit before and was saying, I feel so guilty of taking this money from personal people and things. And I was telling them, you know, trying to say like there's other things that are involved that makes it so that they shouldn't feel guilty, that they're getting an experience and all these different things. But I guess for this panel, you're trying to represent that it doesn't have to be on that super personal guilt-ridden level, that you know expand beyond that to investors with equity. So
yes, sir. Good.
So this is different than crowd investing, and is that something that we will start seeing actual crowd investing?
So I can give a really clear example of the market, what it was, what it is today, and what the future might look like. A good example is Neil Young recently did a Kickstarter campaign for Pono Music. That was a rewards campaign, not investment, where they pre-sold their digital music player. 15,000 pre-sales, $6.2 million raised, really successful. Neil then came and said, hey, I want to offer that community the ability to invest, because they saw things like the Zach Braff film outcome where people donated and then investors got to invest $7 million, and then those large investors got all the return from the success of the project. So at Crowdfunder today, you can raise equity investment through crowdfunding. So we took Neil Young's Pono Music project and we offered that same community of people the ability to invest. And we were able to raise $10.2 million in commitments in just 2 weeks. Now, we couldn't take all that money for Pono, but there was a huge amount of interest. That included non-accredited investors. They weren't allowed to invest. So today, just accredited investors, that already exists today. It's been around for the last year or so. I think it's just a little less understood how to use it, and people are a little cautious, dipping their toes in saying, I don't want to get in regulatory trouble, and I don't know how this works. I think the future holds that it's likely that we'll see the ability for non-accredited investors, everyday people, the ability to come in and also invest alongside angel investors, big financiers, venture capitalists. And that's potentially 3 to 9 months away, depending on the regulatory activities.
So it really is the Wild West.
I wouldn't call it the Wild West. It's regulated, but there's new things happening. It's innovative, I would say. Yeah, yeah.
So eventually, I could make, if I want to fund a project that I want, somebody else's project, I could make a pledge basically to buy a share.
Yeah, so the average investment amount on Crowdfunder for the Pono Music equity crowdfunding campaign was $12,000. But we had investors as large as $250,000 to $1 million. So yes, you actually get a share. It's a published amount of equity that they're selling you in the company. And so you have the ability, like any investor would, to read through all the documentation, to understand, to know more about the company. And actually, if you want, get on a conference call and speak with the founders and the management of the company. Mm-hmm.
I would say, and I'm at some point here, my colleague did a fantastic job. I'm going to have to disagree. There are current ways to actually allow anyone to invest in a crowdfunding campaign. Exemption 504, not only Regulation A, but as at present, 14 states have also have equity crowdfunding mechanisms within their states to allow anyone to invest in film projects or companies.
So that's a good point, that different states have different rules and whatnot. So, because you're based in Houston, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
But we can do actually any state that actually offers that, we can handle that as well.
I have a question.
Yes.
Allowed to ask questions. Having spent most of my career in the film business and working in the digital space in the last 7 years, I'm wondering, has anybody kind of seen the fruits of this kind of crowdfunding, raising money this way? What's the effect of it? Because in the movie business itself, it's like a 10-to-1 ratio of success. And that's because you're a studio and you can keep investing millions and millions of dollars. And they have, like, at best, sometimes single digits, double digit returns at big studios and films. How is this different, or is it different? And do people, are people investing for the same reason that people invest in any film, which is not a good financial reason most of the time? And is this going to sort of be predatory in a way, like, not to be in a bad way, but people are naive, don't know that. They get very, stars in their eyes, and sure, I want to be in part of a movie and I want to invest in a movie. And so does it demand more regulation on something that's so viscerally, sort of appealing to people, as opposed to kind of on a business level?
Well, I just want to call it out and say, let's talk about grandma. Grandma's going to lose all of her money, and she has no information, and she's uneducated, she's not sophisticated, and she should never invest in anything. I don't agree with that basic premise, but I do agree with transparency, disclosure, and restrictions. And so what we see now in the potential for non-accredited investment, not what he's talking about on a state-by-state basis, but a federal exemption potentially, is that it's restricted. And the general restriction would probably net out to something like grandma only being able to invest about $2,500. So she couldn't lose her entire house. She might lose some of her furniture.
Prior to the whole crowdfunding revolution, the number one group of non-industry persons that invested in independent film?
Your grandmother.
My grandmother.
Doctors and lawyers.
Close.
Dentists.
Dentists.
Yes.
Wow.
Ask your dentist. Odds are he's got a film. Mine always has at least 4, and he always goes to con every year. So very, very interesting, right? We have these communities. Yes, sir.
How is the link up between investor and the creatives handled? What I mean is, are these investors going to your site specifically looking to invest in the entertainment industry? Or is your site going out and hunting for equity investors? That's one question. And then the other is, how are the creatives, presented on your site? Do they have a film like The Mighty, or is it a trailer? Is it business plan, you know, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, I guess for us, since we're actually affiliated with a broker dealer, we have those connections that allow us to maneuver in that circumstance. Now, we've also taken on IRA investors or self-directed IRA investors. So through trust companies who have about, from my understanding, about $15 billion under management, as well as several thousand individuals that are accredited investors that can move. So we maneuver in those circles, as well as individual accredited investors, of course. For us, the way it's presented, you can use a trailer or any type of video. You can have more than one video there. All the documentation is readily available to include, like I mentioned before, PPM, subscription agreement, as well as your project plan and all that is there. It does allow the filmmaker to select how they want things seen, meaning on the project level, on the equity level, or things to that effect. Since we are a hybrid site, it is possible on our site to actually do reward-based crowdfunding, although we focus on equity. Those things can run simultaneously, given the fact that we can do both. So you can have a reward raise and then parlay that into an equity raise on one site. We can do that. But it is presented pretty much just like Kickstarter. And I want to refer all those questions to the gentleman in the front row with the Indie Crowdfunder shirt on, because he's the one that actually developed the site, which is right here. He can take all those technical questions. I'm not the technical guru.
Do we have any other questions? Yes, sir.
When you said institutions, that means corporations too? Not like just financial institutions?
So at Crowdfunder, I mean, we have individuals, doctors and dentists investing alongside Sequoia Capital in some examples. So that's an institutional investor, but that's a pretty broad definition. So it could be a corporate strategic, it could be a corporate fund. There's a definition of what's called a qualified investor, above and beyond an individual credit investor, a qualified institutional buyer technically. And that has roughly 5 million in assets or more. And then that qualifies it to make investments on behalf of a company or corporation.
And do I have to bring my own marketing to bring the people there?
So on Crowdfunder, we have a platform. We have tens of thousands of existing individual and institutional investors already on our platform. But the people who have success generally come with first money and or lead investors, people who are already determined a great set of kind of market rate, if you will. And so the larger set of people invest alongside that. We see that we often bring anywhere from 20 to 75% of the funding in a deal. It can just really vary based on how much the project owner or the company driver is really wanting to drive a campaign versus is this really just an augmentation of their direct and offline efforts? And what we generally see is people don't stop raising money one-to-one offline. You should continue to do that, but this is a great way to supersize those efforts and get much bigger distribution.
So what's really exciting, and I think the real takeaway from this is that besides traditional Indiegogo Kickstarter, there are these new companies, new platforms emerging that provide these opportunities for you to raise money, right? You're not just going out and hoping to pull investors in, but there's people out there with money that want to invest in film. It's all about getting your idea to these right people, to these platforms, and then they're pulling the people in. That's the big thing, yes.
Is there a minimum investment? You know, is there a threshold, so to speak? Because you said something about not, you know, low budget projects weren't really appropriate. So what's the lowest both companies are looking for?
So for us at crowdfunder.com, it's really up to the entrepreneur or project owner. We don't dictate that. For deals that we get more involved with, which is a small percentage portion of the companies on our platform, we have about 15,000. On a quarterly basis, we work more directly with 5 to 8 of those. And for that, we set up one of these funds, a special purpose vehicle. That effectively makes it a lot easier to lower the minimum to something like $5,000 or $1,000. We pool all those investors in that fund so that you, if you are the creative running a project, aren't tasked with managing all these people. I manage them for you, and then you tell me what's happening, and I communicate that back to them. So, and this ties into another question, I think, which is interesting, is what happens, what is the investment decision about? Why are people investing when you get it down to $1,000 or $500? And it changes both the risk and return equation, but it also changes like the heart screening equation. So, you know, if I get for the first time to invest in an indie film as a dentist in Buffalo, New York, like I might be really excited about that. And if it goes to zero, as 9 out of 10 do, so be it. I got a quasi director credit, and now I'm skin in the game and I'm flying out to LA.
I actually meant, and I was happy to hear the information you just imparted. I meant, was there a minimum from the creative side? Projects only above X dollars.
So for us, there's a self-serve platform that's Crowdfunder broadly, that's open to the public. As long as you have an actual business, we review that, and then you launch and run your own campaign. So you set those terms. You could raise $1 if you want to do, but you're going to have to pay us a little bit more than $1. You're going to pay us a monthly subscription fee. So you choose that. It's totally up to you. When we set up these funds, the economics generally start working when it gets closer to $350,000 to $500,000 or more.
And I know that companies like Slated, they're at $500,000 plus for films and $250,000 to $2 million for documentaries. Slated is another one that's out there. And then there's one that was just in the trades that Tom Hanks is involved with called Junction. So again, just start researching this stuff. A lot of these companies are out there, and they're all looking at different models. In terms of the whole idea about funding these films, it's really, really interesting, very exciting time, right? Because the awareness factor, I have a lot of research, sorry, but you know, Reading Rainbow, everybody's heard of this, right? The mainstream news, they raised all this money. I was actually trying to get the guy here today that actually did this campaign. You know, they wanted to raise $2 million, and they hit that, and so they hit that like a very short period of time, and then ramped it up to $5 million because they knew they could just scale the thing immensely, right? So in terms of awareness, it's definitely out there. But more and more, you're going to see opportunities, people discovering new models. And that's the thing you have to start research, shopping. It's almost like shopping for a home mortgage, right? You need to be aware of what's going on and what works best for you. Okay? Who else has some questions? Anybody? What does somebody want to know? Come on, it's the end. It's almost the end of the day. Yes.
Yeah. Are there examples of films that have been funded with equity funding?
So what's some of your biggest success stories?
We have some projects that I can't talk about on the works, but we've been focused more on technology and digital media. So I don't have any successes for you today, but I probably will in a
you know, there are a lot of successes in raising money. I don't know if there are any successes in actually making money. And that's the real big question to me, because people put millions of dollars into films with huge amounts of resources behind them, and they're still really hard to get right. And I find that the biggest issue and the biggest gap that exists right now is in the film business is raising your money is all about like this emotional connection, or maybe it's a great script and there's a great talent, but the other side of the equation, which is distributing it, is really challenging, because even if you get into a film festival, everybody thinks that, oh my God, I got into Sundance, it's made. Well, Sundance, not only do they take they take maybe 130 films out of 10,000 that get submitted or something, but then maybe only 40 films of that group get distribution, and only a few get major distribution. So it's this other side of it, which is crowdfunding for distribution. And a friend of mine made a wonderful film, spent $3 million on it, amazing, good talent, and they don't have distribution because all the distribution in the traditional space has dried up. You know, with the exception of an occasional like hot film at a film festival, and you know, every once in a while something else independent, the studios aren't that interested. The independents have gone away, and now you're looking at things like Tug and Gather, which are these crowd-sourcing theater booking sites, so that you take the risk out of film distribution, but then you basically have to continue your crowdfunding. Your crowd, you know, what you're saying is, we have this film. If enough of you want to go see the film, we'll have a screening. Takes all the economic risk out of it, but it means that you're continuing this campaign. Now watch my film. And
we'll get you one way or another. Yeah.
So, but you know, what was interesting about one specific example of that, because it's a military film, I recognized, you know, I was studying it, which was there's a small documentary about World War II vets who get to go to this memorial in Washington, D.C. And, you know, you wouldn't really know about the film, but because there was a very specific interested audience in that, they got through, I think it was Tug, which the Tug and Tug and Gather are two sites which allow you to get theater bookings through crowdsourcing. And that the result was that they made about $160,000 in ticket sales, which is amazing for such a small little documentary. But then they were the #1 documentary on Amazon the next month. So what happened is that you sort of saw the power of that sort of word of mouth and that sort of grassroots marketing, which is at the essence, in a way, of what crowdfunding is all about. You're trying to gather a crowd to say, we support this. You're proving the model in advance in some ways, because if you get enough people to say, I want to see this movie, and then you can get them to actually go see the movie, and then it's good enough for them to tell their friends, then you can now tap into the Netflix and the Amazons and the, you know, the various new sites that are launching, and there's tons of need for original content. All of these new companies that have platforms that want original content, but they don't have it. So anyway, I went off on a tangent maybe, but.
No, not at all. I mean, that's the exciting thing when you think about the notion of, you know, social media campaigns around your independent films, creating transmedia content around your independent films. It all becomes part of a strategy, right? So now these different funding opportunities kind of layer into that. The whole idea about awareness of your film. I know before they were talking about horror films, you know, genre films, things like that. What I've been finding is that more and more, a lot of these films were looking for distribution. You know, the distributors are looking for the social reach of the filmmakers and the brand, because it's such an important thing nowadays. And so that's why more and more when you're creating your films, you need to be aware of this, because that's what it's all about going forward. So, any other questions? Gigi, you have a question? Yes, sir.
Well, this is outside of entertainment, but have you guys had any public-private partnerships? That's the thing I'm looking at, public-private partnerships in real estate.
I don't know about real estate world. I mean, we've been in discussions. I think there's a huge amount of interest in the idea that can private capital help solve and fill gaps that public money can't or won't. Whether it's more of a civic focus, it's reclaiming land for sustainability. I think there's all kinds of really interesting implications and ways for people, the populace, to engage more locally around that. And I think there's platforms dedicated to things like that. There's one here in Los Angeles called Third Place. That's one of the things that they do. So there's some people focused on that in particular, which I think is interesting.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. Actually, one of the highest rated crowdfunding project ever was a video game called Star Citizen. It was done through a Kickstarter. They were looking to raise $2 million, and they raised $58 million.
Wow.
There was a product called the Coolest Cooler, which was a portable 60-point cooler. It contains a battery, a power rechargeable, waterproof, and all the rest. Kickstarter went for $50,000, raised $13 million. So people have money to spend and to put out there. Right?
What happened on those?
What happened to those?
Yeah, what?
I don't know what happened to the game, but I know that.
Some, because I've heard some.
Wow.
Oh, you know?
Some horror stories.
I
Yes.
just think it's really interesting to even question about crowdfunding around film. I think with these success stories in the gaming world, I think it's because they understand gameplay and reward so well.
Sure.
And so that you can buy digital assets within the game. And this is why I think that particular one increased so much. But that's not that really opportunity within films that are linear narrative. So is then the goal of crowdfunding with a film to actually build an audience and a relationship with your audience as opposed to really raising money?
Absolutely. I know one of doing my research, one of the tips that they recommend is actually to not ask for money right away. It's really about building up that awareness, and then you kind of put it out there. People can put it if they want, but you don't really make a big push of please give money, right? Because you want to get them, you want to get people invested in your world and your characters and all the rest, right?
Well, so I could speak on that.
Yes, please,
You know, as somebody who successfully crowdfunded a campaign on Indiegogo, I didn't realize this. There's so many lessons I learned, and the biggest things is that it becomes an entity, a platform for marketing, for people getting involved on a personal level with it, and it's far more than just the looking for money. And if it kind of opened my eyes, and people should really focus on that, because it does add a lot more assets than just the money that you're raising. Yeah, for sure.
And I'll just highlight one thing and say, in the past, it was exclusively the domain of boardrooms and wealthier investors to finance projects like films. And sometimes you got other dentists together, but that's very informal, friends and family. And we're moving to a world where I think people are starting to understand, I don't want to raise money in a boardroom, no one knows about it, and then I have to go out and spend marketing dollars. They become one and the same. And so we see that already with rewards-based crowdfunding. It's not a huge switch over, although there's things like compliance and diligence when it comes to letting those people invest. And so I'm a big believer, not just because of equity crowdfunding, but the ability for technology to automate and simplify a variety of things around industries. People used to say that Amazon isn't going to take over brick and mortar shopping. And you look today at e-commerce and online retailing, you say, oh my God, it's been transformational, but people still like to go to brick and mortar shopping. So it didn't get rid of it. It's just a giant sea change in the way people behave. I believe in 10 years from now, it'll be obvious in the new normal that people say, you know what, I want to get a broader set of audience. I want to integrate my marketing into my financing, whether it's rewards or whether it's equity. And that just makes more sense. I don't have to go out and then raise those dollars and then do marketing. It happens on its own.
So what are some of the characteristics of a well-informed filmmaker that's coming to you guys with their project? What do you want to see in the filmmakers when they come to you?
You know, this is a little annoying for the independent person who's scrappy and doing it on their own, but I want to see someone with a track record. I want to see someone who already has some money in. I want to see a really solid plan and know how they're going to go out and get distribution and marketing. Ultimately, how I shape that instead of bugging them all those things is, tell me why I should invest in this and how I'm going to get my money back, which is a terrible question. I'm an entrepreneur. I hate that question too. I'm fundraising for Crowdfunder all the time. We just closed a VC round, but it's the best question to answer. Yeah.
Yeah, for us, and it's probably bad for indies too, but we actually require those things up front before we actually move forward. You've got to have those LOIs, whether it be for distribution or a talent attached, things like that, or it's not going to go forward with us.
We're almost out of time. Yes, you had a question?
When we first started our web series like 4 years ago, it was new, the crowdfunding, and we got in them. And then I noticed through the years, there were people, I think it was that Kobe beef, and people got spurred in different projects. You invest $500, $1,000, $2,000, whatever, and there's no real guarantee. Have you noticed that people are more cautious now after, now it's because there's no guarantee, there's no contract after you invest $5,000 or whatever? Do you see a swing where nonprofits are better, people are more cautious, holding their money back with the economy?
I'm not, you mean from an equity standpoint? No contract.
For donating, like if somebody has the cooler, what happens to the cooler? All those people invested, you were going to say something about what happened to all these products, and then, they can just keep the money or give it back or whatever, and you don't know what happens. I mean, do they fulfill their promise? Do they, give you in the back end some kind of profit?
It's interesting because I was speaking to my brother about that just recently. From the equity side, there's real costs associated with you spending that money on something other than what you said you were going to spend it on, or just pissing it off. You can't do that. Now, from the reward standpoint, as I was mentioning to my brother, the fact is you've seen a couple of examples like that where they go and they raise all this money and nothing ever happens, nothing comes of it, and there's no real prosecution or any, no real investigation or anything. I believe that you'll start seeing probably within the next year, maybe 2 years, states attorneys generals will start cracking down on that type of thing. Kickstarter has really kind of pawned it off on, hey, we really don't take an interest in these. They just get up on our side. We're open to everybody. I think that's really an excuse, to be honest. So I think you're going to see some more due diligence on their end. And you're going to see, because states attorney generals are going to come in and start prosecuting some of these individuals for such actions. And I think it's necessary. I don't want government to be overreaching, but I think some level of regulation is needed. It just needs to take place.
And I'll just comment a little and say I don't think it might happen. It'll absolutely happen. It's how bad it is, and then what people say about it. And what I think is going to be silly to say about it is see, I told you crowdfunding was a mistake and it doesn't work.
Right.
There's already fraud. There's already theft. There's already people swindling people. That's human nature. How do you regulate it? How do you handle it? How do you punish people? That's the question. And we're just creating a different mousetrap for it. So.
I guess two partial questions. One is there an art and science to figuring out the reward system for super fans? I mean, there's been some great analysis on some of the fundraising, but a big chunk of the money is coming from real premiums. Are there ways to really think of that? And then secondly, there's some things that will never make money, and Patreon's kind of stepped into that space of allowing a patronage system for things like music and nonprofit arts. Are you guys seeing more of that type of thing where there's a monthly ticket or other option to be part of an artistic community?
You guys take that.
He's the art guy.
Oh, getting back to what I've experienced through my short film campaign, people are putting money in for the experience and just to support. And I never realized, and not to take away from equity investors, because obviously there are tons of people who want to get something back, but it was kind of a good feeling to see that there is a huge community out there of people that do want to just contribute to be a part of it. And it's really undervalued, I think. And I know that sounds really altruistic, but it's true. And I think it's very hopeful for the artistic community.
Yeah, I was going to say, because it hasn't been talked about, I think the tremendous power in sort of the democratization in a way of ideas and being able to get money for it is in making change in the world, and whether that's through film or through technology. And that is really the flip side, because we're focusing a lot on how crazy are you as an investor to not really get promised anything and being taken advantage of. But when you have a really good idea that comes from a place of great, passion, you really need, that's the only way you're ever going to get it off the ground, because there's no way that a corporation or somebody's looking at your performance and your P&Ls are going to say yes. So like a Coney video changes the world, and so that's the kind of thing that's happening, which I think is phenomenal.
There was a notable horror director in Taiwan who was doing his next film. And what he did is he started a campaign to raise money. And people paid $300 to be an extra in his movie.
Wow.
Because they love zombie films and they wanted to be zombies. And you can be different kinds of zombies in the film. And then it became this whole event that all his funders came down. It became a big party. And they had all the makeup people and they all put it together. And they were all in the movie. And they all paid to be there. It was really amazing and wonderful and positive and all the rest. So, it's all about knowing your audience and tapping into it and really knowing that the celebration of film, it's the new definition of celebration of film.
This is a crowdfunding cliche now, but you'll be surprised at those who contribute and you'll be surprised at those who don't contribute.
Yeah, I'm still
is
mad
what,
at my mom.
and I have a couple stories where it's like last minute push. I posted on a couple of these gun violence sites because that's what my film is about racism and gun violence and this true life incident. And I just randomly posted it. And all of a sudden this guy comes back and goes, "I'm in." I'm like, what? You don't even know anything about me or anything. It's like, I want to send you a check. Do you want me to do it through the campaign or do you want to do it on the side? It's $2,500, just like that. Mm-hmm. And just because that person, just felt compelled by it and knew the true life story about it. So there's money out there.
Wow. Yep, pretty amazing. All right, any more questions? We're here for you guys, yes?
Do you guys provide financial statement format for the user to study? And the question is how much you're expecting the return rate and how much you're charging on the bounty. And also because of you mentioned about distribution. And this is the distribution in the United States or worldwide distribution. And with this kind of concept, can you do it as a part of a service to provide to the applicant?
So for us at Crowdfunder, we currently don't standardize. One of the things that could be helpful, if you're talking about real estate, it's a lot easier to normalize exactly the asset you're buying and the return. Not that you can't do that in film. We just don't standardize it and force it on people, but we do care about things like back-end definitions. So generally, those are the responsibility, in our case, of the project owner. And then we evaluate and say, do we like that or not? Yes or no. We then provide education to help them understand and make better decisions, but we don't tell them what to do. That's not our role. That could be different at other places, like at a broker dealer, where their role is to be much more involved in the middle of the transaction.
And while our role is to be involved, we don't set that back. There's no standard for us either. The filmmaker can create whether they want to give 120 and 50-50, or up to 120, I'm sorry, and then 50-50 after that. That's entirely up to them. We don't push a standardization on that.
You're going to really need a lawyer. Like the first person to talk to when
Right.
you're going to raise money for a film is to hire a good entertainment
And
lawyer.
we tell you up front, we don't take the place of lawyers or anything to that effect. You need to still have one. Still important.
How much you charge? How much you standard rate expect with the return?
Well, if for us, ours is 5% of whatever your success rate is. Whatever your successful raise is, we get 5%. And of course, you have due diligence costs on top of that you pay, but our standard fee is 2%. He can speak to his own.
Ours is a software fee for the self-serve platform of Crowdfunder. You pay $299. So it's very easy, a great way to get your pitch online and potentially attract investors both already on our platform and from the public. So very inexpensive. However, when we get more involved and we set up the special purpose vehicles or funds that I was talking about, that has a separate set of fees associated with it. Our fee in that is a small setup fee, and then we take a portion of the long-term profits. We don't take a percentage of the funds raised. So we're actually an investor in these companies and we're long on them. Rather than taking money out right now, we want to see the project get financed, be successful, and then we benefit when the project is successful.
And we cannot do that, being affiliated with a broker dealer and license. We cannot own a piece of your project. That's against the law for us to do. So that's why we have to charge that success-based fee.
Are there any common mistakes that filmmakers have when they come to you guys that would be good advice for these people? Things that, that kind of get in the way, make your job harder? Mistakes?
I would say for us, the most common mistake is to come to us and not really have your network established. That's probably the most common mistake for us.
Okay, great.
For us, it's probably, I'll just run down the critical things. One, everyone has to tell a story. And the reason you have to tell a great story is to get an investor to invest, you can't just show them a spreadsheet and a return, because everyone knows, first of all, that's pie in the sky. If you've been pitched once, you know how this works. You see the graph, there's the sales numbers, great, it's all perfect. And then you don't believe it. So you have to tell a great story to people. And that's really about you, why you're the right person for this project, and what can they find emotionally to attach to about it. So painting that story for the non-rational brain and then tying it to the rational brain that wants a return. That's an art. It doesn't happen overnight. So you have to pitch a ton of times to get good at it. You're not going to be good the first time out of the door. So story is really, really important, and translating that into a set of digital assets like your video is even more compelling. So how can you do that? And then the second part relates to what he said is, how do you actually plan a sustained campaign? You don't come to Crowdfunder and then post a document and then the world finds out about it. You actually run a campaign around this where you think about, how am I going to get attention? What is the duration of this, and what are set phases and communities that I can go out to who might be interested, like any PR campaign, like any marketing campaign.
Strategy is such an important thing. That's great. Yes.
I haven't answered my question. The geography, is the owners the United States, or you also accept the foreign?
For us right now, it's just the U.S., and then we have our first international market in Mexico for a variety of reasons, including we're got a grant from the government to expand there. But generally, projects have to be U.S. based, but it could be a foreign company that sets up, say, a Delaware C corporation, and then people are investing into that, and it has rights. So there's ways around it.
Any other questions? Okay, I'd like to thank you all very much for being here today. I really hope you got something out of it.
Thanks.
Good job, man.
Okay. 504 what? 504, it's exemption 504, federal exemption 504. No problem.
Here, David, come on. Let's take a picture. One, two.